Hi, my name is Dave Reske, CEO of Now Speed Marketing, and welcome to this edition of Marketing in the Now, where we talk about the best ideas in marketing. And my guest today is Scott Miller, CMO of Spencer Pruitt. He's also worked across industries like aviation, medical, education, mechanical equipment, sports, and legal technology. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here, Dave.
Scott, did I read in your background that you also had a background in aerospace or engineering?
That's correct. I got out of marketing and went into aerospace design, and in so doing, became a draftsman and worked my way all the way up to lead mechanical engineer
Wow, that's
for a
awesome.
helicopter company.
That sounds like every boy's dream. Heroes,
It
at least it
can
was
be.
at least it was mine when I was a kid. So I thought that sounds really cool. But now you're in
Um,
marketing, you're CMO for a large multinational, and you and I have been talking about communication strategy. And I just want to start by asking you, what have you learned about creating a communication strategy for a large company?
well, that's a great question. And it's not my first rodeo in there, but I'll tell you, communication is the lifeblood of any business. And when you're working with multiple brands like I do right now, it's important to understand your target audience, the pain points, what channels they're looking at to get their information. And then in so doing, you need to craft your messages to reach that audience, to speak their language and understand what they need to hear and what they want to hear in order to make a decision. So the three parts of marketing are obviously build brand awareness, shape perception, and then ultimately drive revenue. That works hand in hand with sales. So communication is so important both internally and externally. You have to do the internal communications. You have to understand what sales is hearing on the phone, what the challenges they're facing are. And then after that, then you can start to craft the content. You can craft those messages. You can use ABM, the account based marketing. You can reach each level and speak their language. You can talk to them about what solutions you bring to their problems. And that's ultimately what they're looking for.
Yeah, you talked about a lot of things there. I just want to unpack them kind of one at a time. Let's just take it from the beginning. When you're developing a communication strategy, you talked about really understanding your target audience's pain points. In your experience, what's the best way to do that? Because it seems like some executives have very clear innate understanding of the pain points, and they live and breathe that. Others take a more maybe academic approach. They do market research, and they personally talk to customers themselves, or they commission studies. How do you think about, really understanding the pain points of your customer in order to really get at what's important to them?
I think as a general strategy, and I'm a marketing generalist, so I've kind of touched every aspect of marketing. And one of the great ways that I've seen is events, trade shows, going actually speaking to the people that are doing the searching for what you're offering. But they're in the research, obviously you look at what the competition's talking about. There's usually somebody who's been in the market longer than you have and they have already done that research. So why start from square one? You can look at what the market is talking about. So not just your competition, but obviously the companies that are in that space, what they're looking for, what challenges they've overcome, and what challenges they're facing. So I look at it in a more broad scope. Look at the competition, look at the social media, do your own Google searching, and talk to people. That's most important. Whether you commission a survey, whether you go out and just start doing polls on different things, it's important to listen to the people that are actually your target audience. They're the wealth of information you're looking for. So why start at square one? Start where they are. And trade shows, when I first started in the helicopter business, I went to a trade show within the first month of becoming their marketing person. And it was amazing what these people will tell you face to face, as opposed to reaching out on social or sending an email campaign out, or even speaking on the phone with a salesperson at a trade show. They're completely transparent. And I love that. It helped me gain so much foothold in that market that the marketing really took off from that point forward.
I love it. Don't start with square one. leverage the information that's already out there, get out there and talk to people and leverage those events in those shows to learn about what's going on. It's just so basic but so powerful because a lot of people just stay in the ivory tower and kind of pretend that all the information is going to be searchable and easy to find. But it feels like you
Why
get those
reinvent the
insights.
wheel?
Yeah, right. Why reinvent the wheel? You're gonna gain so many insights from talking to people. So let's kind of work through your process. So you've talked about like getting those market insights. How does that seems like it's a very human activity to synthesize all those different inputs. How does that translate into positioning and messaging and a strategy for communications?
Once you know the pain points, you have to have that empathy. Marketing is all about empathy. If you can feel that pain, you can kind of understand what they're going to be looking for in the solution. And in that, that's where you craft the message. You craft that message to solve that pain point as quickly as possible. And in so doing, what you're trying to do is tell them you understand that pain. You can feel it for them and with them. And when you do, crafting the solution is really looking inside. What would you be looking for if you were trying to fix that? And if you have that solution, now you can approach that market correctly. If you can't solve that solution, don't waste your time because they're going to see right through it. You don't need to make sales promises and marketing promises on something you don't have passion about and can solve. So that's one of the things I tell the executives. This is probably not a market where we can fix that problem. Let's move into one where we can. So, in that, now you can craft the message because you understand what they feel, and then you can help solve it in a way that makes them listen.
Yeah. Wow. The power of empathy. What if you feel, or maybe your executives feel, or your engineers feel, or your CEO feels that they should have these pain points? They don't really have these pain points yet, but we think they should. And so we're going to build a product that is going to meet a need that we think they're going to have in the future. How does that fit with your model of empathy? Is that a wise strategy or is that fool's errand?
It's
How
a
do you feel about
riskier
that?
strategy, that's for sure, because you're trying to find a need that isn't really out there yet. So if you have a solution that you know can solve a problem that may be coming up in the near future, could be 3 to 5 months, could be a year. If you know that that's going to be hitting the market and that's what your research is going to tell you, you're also going to be speaking to people in other brands. We have multiple brands. So as a salesperson in one brand talks to the salesperson in another brand, they're like, you know what? I think that's going to hit our market too. Maybe we should start focusing some messaging on that. Hit it proactively rather than reactively. And in there, now you've created a sales stream, a revenue stream that wasn't there in that particular market. Trying to find something and create something, not necessarily where I would advise my teams to go, but if there's a logical reason and a strategic reason, we'll do it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that
Testing is all about trying new messaging and
yeah,
seeing what the reaction to it is. You
and
got to test.
and it's probably as you're getting this input, as you're talking to people, there might be a spectrum of how strongly you're getting these messages and how much you rely on that. So that's where the judgment comes in. But let's get back to what you talked about with empathy, and just talk to me about the process of taking that learning and that empathy, and then turning that into communications strategy. Because a lot of people don't understand the connection between that. We might have opinions about what's happening. We might have research. We've learned something about the market, but how do I actually turn that into something that we can do something with in marketing?
Internal discussions first. You've got to talk to your teams.
Hmm.
This is no one lives on an island. No company does, and no company makes decisions with one person at the helm. You've got to talk to your teams and find out what they're hearing. Get their opinion. You want internal champions for any idea you put out there. And that's involved with messaging. So when you start to lay these things out and get their opinions, you're going to see how it works internally first. And that's going to help shape what you say to the outside world, what you project out there. If your internal people can't believe it and get passionate about it, it's going to be very hard for them to help those outside of your company feel passionate about it and understand what it's about. So when you're looking at the messaging, you look at the pain point, you tie your solution to it, and then you try to figure out, okay, these are the words that they're saying to us. These are the ways we can speak to them. And that's where your internal team can help you say, yeah, that's not going to float well from what I'm hearing. And then you can go to events, you can do surveys, you can do all of these things to see which words are getting better reactions than others. And that's A/B testing, obviously. You put out an email campaign, you find out if it resonates or not. Getting traction on the ground, feeling that resonance with your empathy to that market is where you're going to succeed or fail. It's all about measurement. So start small, figure it out. Don't, as they say in science, don't change everything at once, change one thing at a time. If that didn't fix it, try another thing. If it's messaging, if it's subject line in an email, and even if you pick the wrong pain point, that may not be what the market is feeling right now. Move to the next one, move to the next one. You got to keep going until you find that one that kind of unlocks the door. And once this conversation start, now you can get into it. Now you can start seeing where that communication is resonating with them. What makes them take action? That's marketing's job. We have to find out what we say and how they react to it.
It,
And it's not about, making them feel things. They already feel it. We want them to understand that we understand what they're going through, and what we're saying causes them to feel better about it and causes them to react in a positive way. And that could be clicking a link, it could be reading a blog, it could be reacting to a social post. All of these things show us their behavior. And that's what we use to enhance, pivot, or create new content.
it strikes me that it takes quite a bit of humility on the part of the CMO and the marketing team to test all these different messages. Don't you want to just say, hey, I learned this from the market. This is the message. It's right. You got to believe me. Of course, it's going to be right. And maybe I'm exaggerating, but what sounds like what you're saying is you try these messages internally, you get feedback. People say that's stupid. That doesn't work. I don't like it. That's not what I'm hearing. You create other messages, you test it, and you do it all the and then you do the same thing externally till you find it out. So it strikes me it does take a lot of humility to kind of try a lot of things that you can't believe that you're always right, and you have to listen to what others are saying, what the markets say.
Marketers should never be tied to author's pride.
Mm,
We wrote something, we think it's wonderful, we're sure it's going to work, but then nobody reacts to it. It gets no sales, it takes no traction, nobody's talking about it. So what do? Do you, put your flag in the sand and say I'm never moving, or do you pivot and change and react to it in a way that then causes better reactions from the outside audience? That's really the key. Author's pride is brought down many marketing teams, and it doesn't play well in the modern world. We're so reactive, we're so tied in with everything. Information comes in a deluge that we just can't absorb everything at once. So finding the message that stands out, it differentiates itself in some way, shape, or form. That's what we're all looking for as that golden egg. We need it,
yeah.
because if we don't see reactions, we figure nobody listened. That's not necessarily true. It could have set you up for a sales later. So we need to be careful that we don't pivot immediately. These things take time. And as the ideas grow, they can be evergreen ideas, and they could lead to a multi-million-dollar sale next year. So your shaping perception is key here. They want to see you as a credible business,
Yeah.
that you have credible solutions. And that may play into an interview next month. It could play into an article that you're part of and they seek you out for a quote in 2 months. Next quarter, you could be, a feature on a cover of a magazine. You just never know. So we do measure. Analytics are key, but we can only measure so much. Human perception and in the mind, that's where we're working. We're working with how they feel about a company, the credibility, the trust. Trust is everything. People buy from people, they don't buy from companies. So you need to be careful that you're not putting your message out there and thinking that, well, they don't believe us, so I guess it didn't work. Just try another message with a small nuance change and see if that encourages more reaction.
What you're describing is a complex process of learning and then creating and then testing and then kind of iterating and kind of continually learning by getting data and feedback. How do you work with senior management that might assume that, hey, you're the CMO, you should just know what the right message is. Why did you fail on this campaign? Why didn't this one work? Shouldn't you be right every time? I mean, you're the senior leader. How do you bring your senior management into setting their expectations that you're going to be testing, learning, growing, and you might not be right every time. Not every dollar spent will be as effective as every other dollar because you're learning and growing. What's the way to kind of bring management along this journey with you of finding out what the right messaging is?
I think you've covered why many CMOs have a career span in a particular company that's shorter than most other C-level executives.
Hmm.
They're expected to be right every time. You should know what the market wants. You should know what a customer is looking for. We do to a degree, but that's where the testing comes in. If you're not transparent with your management before you take that job, then they're going to expect you to be right every time. It's important that they see you as someone who can understand the market, but it takes time to then create content and create communications that resonate with that market. You have to learn. The only way you learn is to test. And when you look at the results, you can't just live in a vacuum. You've got to test, you've got to analyze, you've got to measure, you've got to take one social post against another. Which one had better interactions? This email campaign had more clicks than this one. Why? Well, that's your job. You now have to figure out, was it the subject line? Was it the content? Was it the image? Was it the timing? All these things play into it. So without testing, you'll never know. And when they ask you that question or they expect that, that's where your honesty up front will lay you out in a great light rather than you never said you weren't going to be right every time.
Yeah,
That you have to be honest in the beginning. If you take that job in marketing and you didn't cover that up front, the expectations could be high and it could be detrimental to your career.
it strikes me that that same process applies to agencies just like it does to CMOs, right? So,
It
when
should,
when we
yes.
get hired as an agency, um, often we feel like the client needs us to be right 100% of the time because we're professionals right away. But yeah, we're going through the same process of testing and learning and growing, and we need that collaborative relationship with our clients. But sometimes clients want us to be right 100% of the time up front too. So I think the process you're describing about setting expectations with senior management is the same thing that happens probably at every level in the marketing organization, right?
And
So
that's
you
why
got
marketing says it needs 3 months of analytics before it can really make solid predictions on whether it's working or not working, because
right.
it doesn't happen overnight. So you might send out an email and it got no opens. Why? Okay, now you have to go through the analytic process. Was it a technical issue? Was it a wording issue? Was it the subject line? Were you just talking about something they don't care about? That's where your expertise comes in. But that 3 months, that's a tough time where no revenue, nothing's changing, you didn't get any more followers. It needs to be brought up ahead of time. It needs to be brought up in the beginning.
Yeah.
And I love when vendors like you come to me and tell me it's going to take 3 months to get this done. Don't expect results overnight. Now I know you're speaking the correct language and I can trust what you're saying. If you say, well, you're going to see followers in the first week, maybe. What happens when it doesn't happen? Is there a performance clause that says I can get out of this?
Right. Yeah, you got to have a trust collaborative relationship, just like the CMO has to have that relationship with the CEO, the CMO has to have the relationship with your direct reports, with the agencies, with the contractors, everybody. It strikes me that trust and collaboration all through the process is essential in getting to a place where you've got effective campaigns. If you don't have that, then you're just saying, hey, we're going to pick the right message from the start. We're always going to be right, and we never have to test or put up with failure, right? So
If you
that
don't measure it, you'll be seen like a king until there's no revenue to tie to it.
yeah, exactly. Talk to me about the measurement side of communications, because I think in the past, maybe we grew up at a time, 20, 30 years ago that measurement wasn't as important in marketing communications. You could get you might do it. Trade shows were easier to measure because you could measure the leads maybe come out of it. But if you're buying trade publication advertising or other brand advertising, you didn't have to measure the results as closely as you do today. What is the role in measurement, and what are the metrics that you look for to know that your communications really are on track?
I think that's a great question that so many people don't quite grasp. Sometimes just not in the same way. We use HubSpot, and it's a great analytic tool. It can control your blog and your social content. It can control just about everything you're pushing out in marketing, and it'll measure it. You can analyze one against another. You can see what the engagement was, what the click rate was on your emails. You can see a click through rate, and when you're spending money, you need to have some kind of idea of an ROI. That return on investment is so important in your quarterly meetings with your executive leadership. They want to know what were the results. And that's where an analytic tool such as HubSpot or Salesforce, when they show what you've done, you can go in weekly, you can go in daily and see the follower count. You can see what was your cost on your pay per clicks, and that cost per conversion is important. So you need to set up your conversions correctly. Is it clicking a link? Is it submitting a form? Is it just reading it and not skimming it? Most of them can tell you whether they opened it and bounced or whether they skimmed it or whether they read it all the way through. Those are important because if they read it all the way through and your percentage of that goes up, your message is resonating. If they skimmed it, okay, it was of interest for them to open it and they didn't just bounce right away from it. If they read your whole blog, now they're looking for information. So that tells you where they are in their buyer journey. They're looking for information, and that title captured their attention. So those are the type of things we look at. Time on blog. How long did they read the email? Did they click? So we all have landing pages and see which landing pages have higher rates of hits, because that now we can see that visitor behavior. Were they looking to do this service or were they looking to do that service? And that visitor journey behavior is what we can look at using Google Analytics, Search Console. All of those tell you which pages they went in order. And that also tells me what brought them in and where did they see other value. Now I can start creating communications and messaging about those other points of value. One brought them in, but others captured their attention. So let's start writing about those and see how it ranks in the keyword searching. And did competition already write about this? Are we just doing a me too, or are we differentiating ourselves in this area?
So, as a CMO, you've kind of you've talked about like the data analytical skills that you've got to have, but you've also got the positioning and the strategy and the creative skills. It strikes me as a challenging role because you've got to become an expert really in all of that in order to be effective. And you've clearly done that, but it's really interesting how as marketers we really have become systems people, data analytics people, creative strategy, and business people, really putting all of that together. It's not enough to just be you know, the communications person who comes up with a good idea, right? You
Well,
gotta,
I think it's important for a CMO, and there's varying schools of thought on this. I think the CMO is really a generalist. If he's already been in the trenches and done website work, creating content, blog writing, trade shows, social, all of those things, you need all those skills in order to speak to your vendors and your internal team correctly. If somebody has a web thing, comes up to you, if you don't know how to build a website, it's going to be hard to have that conversation. If you're not a good author, published in magazines or interviews or things of that nature, written quotes, it's going to be hard to speak to that team about how to improve things. So you're right. The more general you have that knowledge base, if you've touched all those areas, you're going to be a more effective strategic leader because they want your answers. They want your insights. What did your experience do? And if you don't have experience in that area, it's going to be really hard to lead that team.
Yeah, or you can be misled by
Or you can be misled.
experts who don't give you all the facts. So understanding all these pieces, technical and strategic and messaging, is really critical for the role. Scott, we've just got a few minutes left in this conversation, but I wonder if you could think about giving advice to maybe a CMO who's struggling with campaigns that are not working. Like you've talked about, a process, a systematic process from start to finish, where you've thought through, how to get the messaging, how to use the messaging, how to execute all that. But there are many CMOs who've got, maybe they're new into a situation or they're trying to figure out the new role or they've got a product line that's struggling and nothing's working yet, right? So they're trying to figure out how to get it working. What advice would you give to that, man or woman that's really kind of just struggling with their campaigns and can't get anything off the ground?
Sure. I would say one of the things I live by is code. The answer is no until you ask. So, by all means, ask your sales team. They're the ones that have the pulse of your market right there every day, whether it's they're making sales or not making sales. They know the challenges that that market's facing because people are talking to them. Make sure you ask them what would help marketing for you? What would open the door and make it a warm lead that you're calling instead of a cold lead? How do I get our name out there so that when they hear you calling, they're not saying, I've never heard of you before? Those are important aspects of marketing. You've got to help your sales team make revenue. If you don't do that, then marketing is really not going to be adding much value to the company. So if you have a campaign that doesn't work, you've got to think about where can I get information that's different than what I'm doing right now. Don't keep doing the same thing. It's not going to fix it if you change one word in the subject line. Figure out what isn't working. And you can tell if your analytics are going down, your messaging's going in the wrong direction. If your analytics are going up, you've now hit on something that's a little bit better. Now you go talk to your teams. Hey, this seemed to make a positive move in what I'm doing. Will it help you? And if they say yes, that's what we're hearing in the market. Okay, now you've got a plan to move forward. Don't get stuck in a closet trying to figure out I got to fix this on my own. You're not alone.
Mm.
Ask other CMOs. We all are a group. We help each other. Yeah, competition may get a little fierce at times, but we all want to help each other because we're all in the same boat. CMOs are all in the same boat, and we've all worked at different companies. We can use experience from the past company to help you. So reach out, get into groups, talk to people on LinkedIn. We all want to help each other and get training if you need it because don't think you know everything. Nobody knows everything. We all love to learn. Keep learning.
Yeah, that's great advice, Scott. Thank you very much for sharing that. And I love the advice about talking to salespeople and you're not alone and learn fast. And that's really good. So Scott, thank you very much for taking the time in this conversation. If people want to reach out to you, continue this conversation with you, what's the best way for people to get to know you?
Reach out on LinkedIn. You can find me Don Donn. Scott Miller is how you'll find me on everything. I go by my middle name, but my first name's Don, so that's easier to find me on.
That's great. Well, thanks again for taking the time, Scott.
It was a pleasure, Dave. I'm happy to be here, and it was a lot of fun talking about this with you.
Awesome. Enjoy your day.
You too.